forums for candidates seeking the office of Associate Cole County Circuit Judge in the November 3rd general election. I'm Gary Castor, Managing Editor of the Jefferson City News Tribune, and I'll serve as moderator of tonight's forum. Before we get started, I'd like for us to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First, I want to take this opportunity to thank the city for the use of the council chambers for this forum, as well as JCTV for taping and airing the forums. We're streaming the forum on newstribune.com, and JCTV will air it on its channel on later dates. Prior to tonight, the candidates were advised the rules of the forum, which will include opening statements, general questions for the candidates, and closing statements. Candidates will be given 1 minute for an opening statement. As we begin the questions, the candidates will have 2 minutes then to respond to each question. Rebecca Martin, News Tribune City Editor, will serve as timekeeper for the responses. During the course of the forum, I may ask a candidate a follow-up question in hopes of getting a clear understanding of his stance. A candidate may also be granted time to respond or to rebut an answer from a previous question. None of the questions have been shared with the candidates beforehand. Now, let me introduce the candidates for tonight's forum for Associate Circuit Judge. To my left is Brian Stumpy, currently Jefferson City Municipal Judge, who's running on the Republican ticket. Previously, he was Jefferson City Municipal Prosecuting Attorney. To my right is Scott Evans, owner of the law office of Evans, Crowe, Halcomb, who's running on the Democratic ticket. The order for the opening and closing statements was determined by drawing lots. Each candidate will be given 1 minute for an opening statement, and we're going to begin with Brian.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, News Tribune. I appreciate the chance to come here tonight and talk to the voters. It's always a pleasure, especially in this season when it's hard to get out and talk to people to be able to kind of share our message. My name is Brian Stumpy. I'm the Republican candidate for the judge position here in Cole County, and I'm the father of 8 children. I'm married to Laura Stumpy for 23 years. I grew up here in Jeff City, left for a time being, got my undergrad degree at Columbia College, my law degree at the University of Notre Dame. I returned to Jeff City after that, worked in the legal field for several years, served as both the prosecutor and the judge here for Jefferson City. I just want to take the chance to tonight to talk to the voters, let them get to know myself and Scott a little better, and ask for your vote at the end of the evening. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. Scott?
Thank you, Gary. I want to echo and thank the News Tribune for hosting this forum. Thank you to the city for allowing us the space, and JCTV for giving the citizens an opportunity to hear us. I also want to thank the viewers that will listen and tune in, and appreciate their efforts to become informed and educated in this process. I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. I grew up there, went to college at the University of Missouri, and I rarely left mid-Missouri after that. I graduated from the University of Missouri, received a master's degree from Lindenwood University in St. Charles, and came back for law school and graduated from the University of Missouri Columbia. I have been in mid-Missouri for roughly 20 years now, and I have chosen to make Jefferson City my home. My wife and son are here. We love this community. We love being a part of it, and I want to do my part to continue to improve it.
Thank you. All right, well, let's jump into our questions then. We'll start with Scott. How do you feel your experience would help you as an associate circuit judge? To what extent have you practiced in the area of criminal law, family law, complex civil legislation?
Excellent question. Thank you. The associate circuit judge hears such a variety of cases, or can hear such a variety of cases, including criminal cases, family law, probate, juvenile, things of that nature. And I expect that that'll be the case. And my practice it's so diverse and has such a variety I feel very qualified in those areas. I spend a great deal of time on family law matters, juvenile court cases. I have state and federal civil litigation that I've been a part of. I do a little bit of criminal. I won't deny Mr. Stumpy does far more as the municipal judge than I do. However, the other areas that the associate court hears, I feel far more, I feel as though I have the experience necessary. In addition to the juvenile law and the family law, the probate matters are something that are very important for the court to hear. I have represented the public administrator and spent a great deal of time in probate court for the last 8 years. So I think that my experience is very well-rounded and very suited for the variety of cases that the Associate Circuit Court can hear.
Okay, thank you. Brian, same question.
Probably my most experience is in criminal law. As the prosecutor, I filed probably 70 or 80,000 cases over that time. As a judge, I've probably heard over 7 or 8,000 cases so far as a judge on those criminal cases. I've been involved in complex civil litigation extensively in the past. I've done very little family law whatsoever. That's not my forte. I don't think that the Associate Circuit Judge is going to have much family law on their docket as an issue that they will be hearing at this time. I think my experience works very well with the judge position. One, that I've done both prosecution and defense work. I've done both sides of civil litigation as well. And so that allows you to see each case as an individual case. It allows you to see a case not as an information sheet or not as just a docket sheet, but as a real person whose lives you're dealing with. It allows you to see in the civil litigation that there's real consequences when the law is not applied effectively and fairly and as it's written to both parties. So I believe my experience in working with those things and dealing with people day in and day out, and just so many cases we've had to go through, really has prepared me for the position of Associate Circuit Judge.
Okay, thank you. Many of these questions, I should preface this, were submitted by readers or groups. So as I get an opportunity, I will certainly mention who submitted the question and give them credit for the question. So that being said, the next question comes from the Cole County Democratic Committee. We'll start with you, Brian. Do you believe that all citizens have adequate access to legal help in the legal system? If not, what can be done to provide wider and better access?
Well, I would say no. They don't have that access. When you have the public defender's office can't send out mail because their postage budget is done for the month. When you have a huge waiting list for people to be represented by counsel in the criminal world, there's a big problem that there's that wait list and they cannot get that coverage. There are several things that could be done. I think one, but they're really not often done by the judge, right? It's not the judge's role in those situations. But legislatively, one thing that could be done is that we could change, and through councils, we could change how the public defender system looks. Could we not just deploy full-time public defenders, but part-time public defenders? If you do that, you're not paying for all the benefits and all the extra costs in there, and you can leave the part-time public defenders to do the smaller misdemeanor cases and free up the full-time public defenders to work on more complex cases that way. Right now, every person that pays Missouri bar dues pays $35 into a legal aid fund, which is great, and it helps people that can't afford the civil lawyer, but also, could we change that to that money goes into the fund that funds the public defenders, where you have a right to the attorney? So I think those are two ways that we could address things to further help and assist those that don't have legal help to have legal help. Also, at the city level right now, we appoint attorneys for people that we determine to be indigent. There's a list of attorneys who we pull from that then volunteer, and they get paid though a small amount to represent those people. There's also a very large waiting list of conflict cases for the public defender's office. If more lawyers were aware of that and how to be involved with that, they could pick up the slack on a lot of those cases and assist the state by giving legal representation to those who cannot afford it.
Okay, thank you. Same question, Scott.
Thank you. I absolutely do not feel that everyone has adequate access to the representation that they deserve. And it goes beyond the public defender's office. The public defender's office is an important part when you're focusing on the criminal law and the criminal cases. And some of the things that Mr. Stumpy mentioned as that the legislature could do are certainly true, but they're not anything that the court has the authority to do. It goes beyond the criminal cases, though. It goes to the civil cases and the child custody cases and the divorces and the people that simply cannot afford representation. They are at a disadvantage in the court, and we've got Mid-Missouri Legal Services here in town that is designed to help those people. However, most people don't qualify for some reason, or, like the public defender's office, they simply don't have the ability and time due to the resources that they have, number of attorneys that they have. So something has to be done, and it goes beyond just the criminal cases. It goes into really all of the matters that are before the court. I think that there are ways that the courts could help. The local Cole County Bar Association could be something that assists in this. I'm currently the vice president of the Cole County Bar Association, and I believe that attorneys have a responsibility to assist when they can. And working collaboratively, the courts with the Bar Association, we might be able to come up with a way to help ease some of the burden on these minor level cases where some attorneys could pick up a few to help out, which would free up the public defenders and Mid-Missouri Legal Services, those things, for the larger cases that require more time and attention. So that is one way. And another way is the judges simply could be more compassionate and more understanding about the situation. And it's not their job to push a case through as fast as possible, but if somebody needs a little bit of time to get the representation they need, that's important as well.
All right, thank you. Scott, next question will come to you. Whether it's due to a lack of public defenders or other factors, people have expressed that it takes a long time for cases to make it through the local courts, which likely has been exacerbated by recent changes due to COVID-19. What would you do as a judge to bring cases through the court more quickly, and what systemic factors need to be changed?
Thank you. I agree. There are times that these cases drag on, and it seems as though they'll never end. And these people, a lot of times, cannot move forward with their life with this hanging over their head. They can't get a job because the employer will search CaseNet and sees they've been charged with something, or they cannot move forward with something as far as their day-to-day life. So I do think that there are times when it would be important to speed up the process. A lot of that, the responsibility is going to fall on the attorneys and the prosecutors, and sometimes these cases are slow by design and at the request of those parties. But really, one thing that the judges can do is hold people's feet to the fire. If you're the prosecutor and you want to bring this case and you've got a case, well, then do it. If you're the defense attorney and you're going to defend your client, let's do it. There's no reason that it needs to drag on for 12 months when it could be done in 6. So some of it is an accountability and a holding the parties accountable for moving their cases forward. And sometimes it's on the court. You might have let's say in a divorce case, somebody needs some discovery or needs some documents, and they're not getting cooperation from the other side. Well, they can't get a court date on it for 4 weeks. So there might need to be some adjustment to some of those small matters that are holding cases up and having them heard, whether it be by video dockets or telephone conferences, things of that nature, to help prevent that delay that occurs for weeks at a time waiting to get before the judge.
Okay, thank you. Brian, same question.
Thank you, Gary. One thing that should assist greatly is the addition of the second judge in Cole County, associate second judge in Cole County. Right now, Judge Walker hears over twice the number of cases as the second busiest judge in the state of Missouri. So to free that up and to allow those times, allow court dates to happen, and allow trial dates to happen, I think will greatly assist that. The other thing is when a case is set for trial, the case should be set for trial. So often there's a continuance request upon a continuance request upon a continuance request. And there's got to be a point where if you're going to set it for trial, be ready to go to trial. When I was the prosecutor for the city, I probably tried over 2,000 cases through that time. We pushed cases forward. We tried them quickly and efficiently. And I think there's a big backlog of cases to be tried right now. One issue is where do you pool a jury right now? Where's big enough for that? And I know that Judge Beadham has been working on that a lot lately to try and find an effective answer to that question. But also with the courts being closed down so much through COVID, with more things being done via WebEx and telecommunication, that's going to slow things temporarily. But I think we need to utilize then, with the efficiency of that in some regards, more times to set trials and set court dates and be able to, on day one, start moving forward with those things and hearing those trials and being ready to move cases forward.
Okay, thank you. Next question starts with you, Brian. Comes from the Jefferson City Police Officers Association. There are currently 3 pretrial participants facing murder charges who are on court-granted release in Cole County. Explain your stance on the pretrial release program and how it applies to violent offenders, especially those defendants who are repeat offenders within the program.
Is how it currently applies to those people? Or
I
how
think
it should apply?
generally, how it should apply generally.
Well, I think that pretrial release has its place. I don't think its place is with people that have recidivism issues. With repeat offenders that have shown that when they're out and they reoffend, there's a question of whether or not they are or are not a danger or a threat to society. And if they are a danger and or a threat to society, then I don't think that the pretrial release program is proper for those people. I don't run that program. I don't have a bit of say in that program right now, but I'll tell you that I don't believe the person who is on their 3rd or 4th felony or the 2nd felony has a murder charge is a very good candidate for that. I know, 10 years ago, next week, my office was robbed downtown on Capitol Avenue. He was out on parole for his 4th armed robbery when that happened. And I think that really kind of tempers my view on things and how I see stuff, that I think he was not a good candidate for parole. The same person facing those charges is not a good candidate for the pretrial release program in my mind.
Okay, thank you. Scott?
Thank you. I can support the pretrial release program in instances of first-time offenders, nonviolent, and minor offenses. I don't believe that the pretrial release program is appropriate for anyone that has committed any sort of violent crime or a repeat offender, or anyone that has a charge with resisting arrest or interfering with any sort of law or peace officer. I think we've seen so much in the news lately of this person did X and got a bond, or they were out on bond and committed this additional crime. And I think that a judge has a responsibility to the community to help curb that when they can. There are certain guidelines from the Supreme Court that the judge must consider when determining a bond or a pretrial release. Of course, those must be followed. But there is some discretion in regards to these repeat offenders that are prone to go out, commit more crimes, and they're not committing the same crimes, they're committing worse crimes each time. And that's not something that I have any patience for. So I believe that pretrial release is appropriate in certain situations, instances of fleeing, resisting arrest, violent offenses, repeat offenders. I don't believe that that's the right situation.
All right, thank you. You mentioned cash bonds. That's going to be our next question. Comes from a couple of our readers. Had the same questions regarding cash bonds. Do you favor elimination of money bail for most crimes, since it discriminates against lower income residents who likely can't afford it and who could lose their job and home if they miss work while in jail waiting to go through the criminal justice system? And the follow-up question is, when is a cash bond appropriate and when is it not?
There's multi-parts there.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so Cash bonds. I do think that cash bonds are something that the judges and the courts can utilize. I do think it's a case-by-case basis. There is no reason to give someone that doesn't have a job and has no way of paying a cash bond. That is redundant. You're defeating the purpose. Cash bonds could be appropriate where the first question is a bond appropriate? And if you get over that hurdle, and then it is, what is that bond going to be? A cash bond for someone that can't afford it is not something that I'm willing to consider. Cash bonds in situations of people that could afford it or where it could be properly utilized, I don't see why that couldn't be something the courts to consider. But the instances of poor people and giving them cash bonds, such as the question alludes to, that's not something I think is very appropriate. There are other ways that you can, other conditions that you can set on a bond. And it goes to, like an electronic monitor program as well. Those are great, but they cost money. And there's a daily cost to an electronic monitor or house arrest, however you want to call it. And offering that to someone that has no ability to pay for it just doesn't seem very logical to me. The other part of the question about people losing their job, missing work, things of that nature, it's, again, case-by-case basis. If you're in jail, typically there's a reason you're there, and there's a choice that's been made, and that sometimes comes with consequences. I can't guarantee that people aren't going to lose work if they can't get there, but I do think it's something to consider, and there are other conditions of bond or pretrial release, and there is that program that can help monitor so that people can keep their job, can make their court obligations, but also have a responsibility to the court.
Okay, so a follow-up question to you. Take 15 seconds to answer.
Sure.
Give me some examples of what some of those conditions would be for someone who couldn't afford a cash bond.
Sure. Well, with the pretrial release program is really the prime example, and it's essentially a form of probation before you've been tried and had your sentence. So the pretrial release program could help monitor and oversee that they are maintaining employment or maintaining whatever obligations have been put down that typically would be agreed upon by the prosecutor and the defense attorney. But that is something it's essentially an oversight program, and if they lose that second chance to be out, well, then you have to look at whether or not a bond or release of any type is appropriate while we get the case done.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Brian, same question.
Would you repeat the question, please, Gary?
Sure. Do you favor elimination of money bail for most crimes since it discriminates against lower-income residents who likely can't afford it and who could lose their jobs and home if they miss work while in jail waiting to go through the criminal justice system? When is a cash bond appropriate and when is it not?
I guess the first is a clarification of a cash bond versus a surety bond. Both are money bonds. One, you pay a bondsman a percentage of the bond to get out, and one is just a straight cash bond where you pay the full amount. Bonds are set and bonds are given. One of the things is, are you a threat or a danger to society, right? And so if a cash-only bond is given, generally a cash-only bond is only situated and set forth in a situation where you are a grave danger to society. So the issue of you may lose your job if you can't post a bond, it's a consideration, but I think more important consideration is, are you going to kill somebody else? Are you going to rape somebody else? Are you going to burn somebody else's house down? And so the issue with the cash-only bond is only in extreme situations. It's only when there's a great fear that the person may flee the area and they are a threat to society. So with that in mind, I think the elimination of the cash bond is not a good thing, because it's done, A, to secure you to come back to court, and B, to protect society from you should you be out. On the same token, the bond needs to be based upon what's attainable, right? So to $1 million bond to one man might be the same as a $100 bond to another man. And so you need to revisit those bonds and where those bonds are set, to have bond hearings and bond investigations to determine whether or not it is ever an attainable thing. And so the amount of the cash bond would be contingent upon the financial situation of the person in some situations. In other situations, it would not. There are surety bonds that are kind of pretty standard that's set forth out there. A $5 surety bond is $50 to a bondsman. A $100 surety bond is $50 to a bondsman. So those kind of meld together at some points. But the cash bond is only to be used in extreme situations and to protect society and to assure you to come back to court.
Okay. Next question starts with you, Brian. It comes from Jan Schumacher. What are your views on alternative sentencing and or diversion programs for nonviolent offenders?
Well, in the past, I worked very close with Judge Walker, the city court. We developed the first of its kind DWI court for first-time offenders. It's one of the few courts like that, not just in the state, but in the country, that deal with that issue. We worked very closely with developed community volunteers to help at-risk youth get back into school, back into family counseling, back into their homes, time and time again with great success. I had a program where the young first-time speeder, a high school kid, gets his first ticket. He does 1 hour, or she does 1 hour of community service per every mile over they were going. It makes no sense to me to have mom or dad write a check for that child that was speeding, because I don't think the child learns anything from that. But by having them take responsibility and work off that, I think that a kid that has to go to the animal shelter and pick up the dog poop learns a whole lot more doing that for 15 hours than mom writing a check for him. But I'm very in favor of alternative diversion programs. We've done programs that we help homeless people attain housing. We find the root issue of the problem and try to address that. We've helped people get mental health treatment. We've helped people get addiction for drugs and alcohol and things like that over and over again throughout the past 8 years. We've got a wide net of volunteers that don't get paid a nickel to come help us in court, that show up every Wednesday, that show up at the associate court every week with Judge Walker to try and address those issues of the nonviolent offenders, the people that are just now beginning their criminal career, how to readjust their direction and readjust their focus in life to where they can become very successful in society instead of travel down that road they're on right now.
Okay, thank you. Scott, same question.
Thank you. I'm a great supporter for these alternative sentencing and diversion programs. I think there is a great place in the courts and in society for these, specifically related to first-time offenders, minor offenses, nonviolent crimes. I would much rather work with someone to rehabilitate them than issue some sort of sentence and see them back in 6 months on the same type of crime. I believe that society as a whole is better. I believe the community will be better for it. And I think that these programs that are in place and additional programs that we might be able to explore looking into in the future have a great benefit for Cole County. I know that especially with the drug court program, the veterans court program, mental health is a big point in society, and for me these days, I'd rather have somebody get the help that they need rather than some sort of punishment that isn't going to sit in with them. I think it'll be a lot more valuable to everyone, including the defendant in those situations. If somebody stole, why did they steal? Let's learn a little bit about it. Did they steal because it was fun, or did they steal because they needed to eat and there was some food that they needed to feed their family? If there's ways to help these people out to better the situation so that they are not committing these crimes as an avenue to solve their problems, I think that's something that we have a responsibility to do. And I firmly believe that these programs are, in the right situations, are appropriate and beneficial for everyone.
All right, thank you. Next question, we'll start with you, Scott. The state recently held a special legislative session devoted to addressing violent crime. Do Missouri and Cole County have an issue with violent crime? If so, how do you believe it should be addressed?
Well, my head's not in the sand. I'd love to say I don't think there's an issue, but I read the paper and I watch the news, and we've seen I believe, an uptick in some of these violent crimes, murders, really things that I think we all know that they're going on. And what can we do? Well, going back to one of the earlier questions is, don't let those people out of jail that have done it before. And hold them accountable, okay? Somebody that has stabbed someone is going to stab somebody again in the right situation. Don't let them out. Don't give them that bond. Don't give them the cookie cutter sentence, okay? The courts can take a responsibility in helping make sure some of these people that have been through the courts and have worked their way up from, the stealing and the marijuana up to the arson and murder, and, they see it coming. So the courts have a responsibility to help make sure that we don't get to that point. So I think that there is a problem. I think that there's a problem across the nation. I think we're seeing it in Cole County. And I think that as the judge, part of our responsibility is cutting that off before it gets to that point. And if there is somebody that has done some of those things, make sure that they stay somewhere where the community is not going to be in danger.
All right, thank you. Same question, Brian?
I think we have a much more serious issue with violent crime today than we had 10 years ago, than we had 12 years ago, than we had 5 years ago. I think one way to address that is, how do you deal with the lower level crimes? If you discard the lower level crimes and act like they don't really exist and it's not a very big deal, and people know they can get away with small things, they'll then progress and think they get away with larger things. It's called the broken window theory. And it's what they utilized to clean up New York City in the 80s. That terrible problem with murders, terrible problem with violent crime, and they began to really enforce the smaller issues. And as they enforced the smaller issues, the larger crimes dropped exponentially. And so while there's importance of diversion rates and things like that, as you see people come back, you see people over and over again, there's got to be a real consequence for your actions. The number of police chases is up. It's up a lot. And there needs to be a consequence for that action. When a police officer and police vehicle chases another vehicle through town, it becomes very dangerous for everyone else around there. And so this should be taken very seriously. And there should be a serious consequence for those that put your life and my kids' lives in danger. When someone resists arrest, it becomes a very difficult and dangerous situation. When 20 people circle 2 officers trying to effectuate an arrest, it becomes a very dangerous situation. And when people believe they can get away with creating those dangerous situations, when they can say, hey, I want to do what I want to do, there's no consequence, then the violent crime escalates and expands. And so we need to address those people at the lower level as well before it becomes that great big problem. And so I believe if we as a court system, we as judges hold people accountable to the level they should be held accountable in those situations, that you will then see a drop in the shootings and the violent crime that goes on in our community.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to circle back with both of you on this question. So you both have been in a courtroom setting in different roles, but what are the tools you would like the legislature to give you if you are a judge in this associate circuit position? What would you have liked to have seen come out of this legislative session? What are quantifiable tools that would help you minister justice?
Who goes first?
You go first.
All right. Well, one thing, the legislative session was narrowly tailored, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that session cannot be expanded upon. I don't think any issue that they discussed in that session really pertains to the associate circuit judge and a tool in their toolbox to utilize. One thing that I think, it's such a hard question because you're asking me to step out of my bounds, right? Mm-hmm. As a judge, I'm locked in this position. I am not a legislator. I cannot legislate. I can apply the law as written, and that's as far as I can go. But you're saying, if I had a wish list, what would that wish list be? I think we need more ability for bonds for misdemeanors. When somebody comes in and they blow a .367 on the first time DWI, and they're let free, they're processed in and released, that there's no bond. Well, what tells me they're safe going out there right away? I mean, so I think there's some issues on bonds that there should be more freedom to the judges given back that have been taken away. That would very much help us as a tool to our toolbox. I think that for legislators to fund the public defender system better would give us another tool, because we then have the ability to be more efficient in the system. If the legislature could fund CASA more to help out the kids, I think that would be a great thing for us to utilize. That if they would fund alternative courts more for us, that'd be a wonderful thing. If they would increase the funding for in the restorative justice programs, I think that would help us out greatly as well. But really, all we can do is apply the law to the facts. That's as far as we can go. The other tools in our toolbox that would help us are periphery things. That would be other services that I think could be beneficial to people that are in trouble or people that are victims of crimes. I think that would help us out in some way, but as far as our job, we're just applying the law to the facts, and we can't go outside of that.
Okay. Scott, same question.
Yeah, my answer is going to be largely similar. I don't think like a legislator. I'm not running for the House, and as a judge, it is not my intention to legislate from the bench, as they say. It is my job to take what is given before me and apply that law and to the facts of the situation. So it's difficult for me to presume what should the legislature do. But I think it's beyond, to answer the question, it's beyond the legislature. It's also the Supreme Court and the guidelines that we get from the Supreme Court of Missouri. And I believe the judges, if they had more discretion in certain areas, particularly bond, we've talked a lot about criminal cases and bonds tonight, but more discretion, especially in these instances where maybe it's a first-time offender, but it's a violent crime. Well, they're not going to have as many points that a repeat offender would have, but they might be just as likely as that repeat offender to go out and be a danger to society. So a little bit more discretion in the bonds would be helpful, but also funding of these alternative and diversion programs would be a great benefit. If we can get them when they're 19 and they've committed that first crime that's minor, and get them back on track, as opposed to now they're 29 and they've got 7, case net pages of crimes that they've committed. I think that some of these funding and the ability to help rehabilitate at an early stage would be beneficial.
All right, thank you. Scott, next question will go to you. It comes from the Jefferson City Police Officers Association. According to statistics provided by the Jefferson City Fraternal Order of Police, weapons offenses in our community have increased nearly 30% from 2018 into 2019, and the rise continues through 2020. What is your stance on gun violence, and how does that apply to sentencing firearm-related violent crimes?
Thank you. So gun violence and firearm-related crimes are going to fall in those categories that I've outlined earlier of the violent and those types of crimes that I frankly don't have much patience for. I don't want to worry that myself and my wife and child are going to be out at Target and have to worry about gun violence. It's something that it's a big part of why I'm running for judge, is because I feel a responsibility and I want to take some ownership in the safety of our community. So I think if that status correct, 30% in a 2-year span, that is a trend that we need to stop, and that is something that the judges could help out with. I heard also, to pivot a little, I heard a presentation from Jeremy Bowman with the Fraternal Order of the Police, and our police officers in this town seem to be grossly underpaid. And I believe that if that is something that could be addressed by the council, that also might help out with some of these officer retention and building those relationships that officers could have with the community, that might help aid in knowing when and where some of these crimes are happening. If we've got officers, a revolving door of officers, because the new officers come in, find out they can get paid more by going to Columbia, and they lose out on those relationships that they're establishing with the citizens and the people in the community. All of a sudden, they don't trust the new officers as much. So I think it would be great if we could address that, keep retention of our officers, help build those relationships with the community, and we might be able to cut off some of these violent crimes and gun crimes from happening, because we'll simply know about where they might be, and the officers might be able to do their job a little bit easier.
All right. Brian, same question.
Well, on July 4th of 1997, a guy came to a restaurant I worked at, and we weren't open yet. And he went next door to Ruby Tuesdays in Clinton, Missouri, and he shot the delivery driver and killed the driver, and he shot the manager and murdered her as well, I think for $55. His name was Earl Ringo Jr. 10 years ago, my office got robbed by a guy that shot my friend over and over and over and over again. With that in my background, I have no tolerance for violent gun crime. That there's no wiggle room in there. That if you come to court and I'm the judge on your case and you're guilty of a violent gun charge, you're going to wish you changed judges. You're going to wish you didn't have Judge Stumpy, because I'm going to enforce and I'm going to sentence you in a manner and fashion that you will not be a threat to society for quite a while with the guns and with that violent nature. However, Scott and I are running for associate judge, and we don't hear those kinds of cases. We can set a bond for that kind of case early on, but we can't hear the case itself at that time. We can hear a preliminary hearing at that time, but generally those are going through grand jury and don't even come through our court for us. But I think it's important to know that that gun violence will not be tolerated, and that goes back to the resisting. That goes back to the making a ring of people around officers that are trying to arrest somebody. That we're creating in our situation, we're creating in our system right now, in our society, a way that these violent tendencies are accepted, and they should not be. The person that does that needs to be held accountable. So I think you attack the gun crime not just then, but early on, when you see people that try and flaunt the law, try and flaunt the authority, and try and get away with putting officers in a very dangerous situation. Because if that danger is okay, then other dangers in their mind are also okay.
Okay, thank you. Next question will start with you. In this period of civil unrest that's sweeping much of the nation, what could you as a judge do to address the public's concerns about safety and equal justice? Is criminal justice reform needed, and if so, what key reforms would you recommend?
You have three questions there.
I do.
With the unrest, what would I as a judge do to make sure there's fair and equal, can you say it again?
Yes, to address the public's concerns about safety and equal justice.
Okay. Well, the judge's job first and foremost is equal justice, right? And so people are judged, are tried based upon what their actions were and what the actions of the officers were rights violated to make the arrest. Was it a valid and lawful arrest? And so first and foremost, we need to make sure that everyone has their rights and everyone has an actual, true, fair day in court, right? And so if you can't have a true and fair day in court, well, then none of us are safe. So the first and foremost, I think, issue we need to make sure that we ensure people have is, A, that they know that when they come to court, they'll be treated fairly and justly by the system. And until that happens, there can be no safety and security. So once that happens, I think how we address the safety and security issues are that people, again, are held accountable for those actions. We don't have that huge civil unrest here. We don't have buildings burning. We don't have all this stuff going on. Our police force, the sheriff's department, Cal Police have done a great job working with people through this protest time, and it's been very, very well managed. So we don't have the issue. Should that arise, though, then when the police arrest someone, they're afforded their rights, and they're tried according based on what the law says, what the law allows, what the law does not allow. So the job of the judge then to ensure safety is based upon applying the law as written to that individual's situation. And I've missed the third part of your question. I apologize.
That's good. If so, what key reforms would you recommend?
What's before if so? I'm sorry, Gary.
Is criminal justice reform needed, and if so, what key reforms would you recommend?
You know, it is. I think there's too many crimes right now that carry jail time that shouldn't carry jail time, right? If I keep a raccoon, a pet raccoon, that can put me in jail. If I put my arms out on a roller coaster, that can be a jailable offense at times. So we need to make sure that crimes that are truly worthy of jail time are that, and crimes that are not worthy of jail time are not getting the possibility of the jail sentence. I'm out of time over here.
Okay. Take 15 more seconds. Give me some more on what key reforms you'd recommend.
I think we need a reform in drug policy right now. I think that we see things that are designed that have a for sure racial bias in them that were designed as such initially. I think so. There's a big reform needed in drug policy this time as well.
Okay. Thank you. Scott, same question.
Thank you. So, I want to touch on something that Mr. Stumpy said, that I believe there is some civil unrest in this area. It's just not the violent kind that we're hearing in the news in these big cities. I mean, you can go to the Capitol. I mean, we're fortunate as the capital city here in Jefferson City that we have an opportunity to have our voices heard by the people that matter. And on a regular basis, there are people there that are peacefully protesting for what they believe, and they are peacefully trying to make their point about some of the issues that are out in society. So I think there is some of that civil unrest here in this town. I just don't believe that it's as violent, which is, it says a lot about the citizens here. So, equal justice concerns and safety concerns. I think the biggest thing that a judge is responsible for is being respectful to every single person that comes before them. Everyone that comes into the courtroom has the same rights as the person sitting next to them, regardless of their age, sex, race, gender, anything. So I think it's important for the judge to be respectful to everyone, make sure that those people feel that they are being respected and being treated fairly, and not that the judge is just going through the docket and marking the boxes and trying to get out of there. So I think it's important that the judge is fair and respectful to everyone that's out there, and when they leave feeling that they've been treated fairly, I think it'll go a long way towards the entire issues with the system. So, and as far as safety goes, again, we've talked a lot about bonds. We've talked almost exclusively about criminal type of cases, and the associate court will hear some, but they're minor. The major offenses and the major crimes that a lot of these questions have been tailored to are going to be heard at the circuit court level, which we are not responsible for at this point in time, and we're not looking to be responsible for them. So, but I do think that the judge, the associate judge, could, again, help with the bonds and making sure that the people that need to be at the sheriff's office are there, and making sure that the right people that deserve bond and deserve release are out. I'm out of time, so as far as the reform, I'll have to defer.
I'll give you 15 seconds.
Sure. Okay, so again, these minor offenses and these drug offenses, especially marijuana, I mean, the state of Missouri is on the path towards marijuana being legalized, both medically and recreationally, yet we spend so much time in our courts working with someone that has a minor first-time possession offense or things of that nature. And if, it's illegal, it's not right, you're not supposed to do it, but, you don't need the book thrown at you right now. And we might be sentencing someone today that 5 years from now is going to be something completely legal. So I think some reform in how we are able to address, especially the drug and the minor drug offenses. Marijuana is different from heroin and methamphetamine. And I think that there needs to be some reform, and that will give some guidance to the courts on how to handle those, because we spend so much time on these minor drug offenses that instead of, and resources such as the public defender's office on those cases, and it's taken away from some of the more major pressing issues.
All right, thank you. Before we go to our next question, I will add, I think, to both of your points you both have made, clearly some of these elements do not fall within the purview of an associate circuit judge. But I think for viewers, listeners, readers, it helps them understand your state of mind as to how you pursue equal justice, how you your reasoning. And so, and it's not uncommon for an associate circuit judge at some point to be a circuit judge. And so I think that really helps folks understand where you're coming from. Sure. All right, so next question. We started down with Brian, so this will be Scott. So Cole County Democratic Committee asks, what do you believe are the causes of the high rates of minority incarceration?
A lot of that comes to representation and being able to afford appropriate representation. I've seen it in courts. We have the privilege of being in the courtroom and seeing many other cases heard by other attorneys or by public defenders, and I think having a good lawyer makes a difference. And a lot of these, when we talk about the minorities, I would say a great high percentage of those are represented by who they could afford, or an overworked public defender system that has simply far too many cases and clients. So representation matters in these cases, and I think that plays a great deal in why we see a high level of minorities that are incarcerated for those crimes. I don't have the statistics in front of me, so I don't know, but I do not know if the minorities are arrested and charges are brought against minorities at a higher rate. I simply don't know. But I assume that also plays a part in why we see more minorities, and that goes to, again, it goes to the policing and who has brought them in and what they're charged with. So I don't know the answer to that. I don't know those statistics, but I would say representation matters, and it goes, we had a question earlier about, I think we both talked about the public defender's office and funding and availability, and it ties into that. So many of these people will self-represent, or they'll find the cheapest that they can because it's all that they can afford. So I think making things more available to all parties and not just the people that can afford is important.
Thank you. Brian, same question.
You know, one of the statistics that rings true, that sets forth what your probability for incarceration is your level of education. And I think we've done a very poor job in our society of leaving certain areas of our town, areas of our communities behind in the education realm. And one thing we worked hard at the municipal level is to get kids back in school, to get kids to succeed. Because the education level, if you get a high school diploma, you have a lower risk of going to prison than if you don't have one. If you have a college degree, you have a lower risk of going to prison than just a high school degree. So we work very hard with students that come in that are dropping out of high school, and to get them back into high school, to require them, instead of going to jail for this, get your GED. And it might take a long time to get it, and we work with them for a long time, and they take small steps, and they work towards that GED. They work towards getting back in school and getting their high school diploma, and that gives them a level of success. It makes them feel good. It gives them an accomplishment that they've reached, they've attained at this point. It also gets them out of that pool. It takes them out of that high-risk category. And Scott's right, there's also representation issues that we have as well. But I think a lot of stuff can also be handled early on in diversion programs, in ways that we get people out of that criminal path and out of that criminal career, that we get mentors. We have mentors that show up at the city court. Charles Jackson, he'll take you under his wing and work with you. He really tries to reach out to you. We have Ted Solomon that helps with people. We have people from the schools that come in and talk with us. And so we're doing a great focus on the education way, because that's an indicator of potential prison in the future. And so we've really tried to work on that. There's also the representation issue. I think that's a funding problem, that public defenders are overworked. We have a great public defender system here in town. We have some really good attorneys that are doing that. But we need to get the funding there to free them up, to allow them to work more effectively.
Okay, thank you. Brian, what do you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice, if any?
You know, when I was in Indiana, I worked one summer with the public defender's office, and I saw a white guy with methamphetamine get pretrial diversion, and a black guy with marijuana go to jail. And I saw a white guy that stole a car stereo get pretrial diversion, and a Latino guy that stole 2 Twinkies go to jail. And so I think the biggest obstacle to justice in our society is that we have a prosecutor, and not our prosecutor. I'm not talking about Prosecutor Thompson, just globally here. We have prosecutors that are going to give a recommendation, often based upon that racial issue, right? We'll have an attorney or a public defender, and again, not ours, this is global, that will tell their client, go ahead and take the offer. And then we have a judge that accepts that offer. So the blame, it's a systemic problem. The blame isn't upon a prosecutor, a defense attorney, or a judge, but all three have gotten stale. And all three, the prosecutor believes in wins and losses, not in justice. The attorney wants to just get his paycheck and go home. And the judge doesn't see the case file. The prosecutor recommends A, the defense guy agrees to it, and he goes along with it. And so there's a problem that I think that's the biggest obstacle to justice, is that we have to have people that are of high character and high integrity in the system. That the prosecutor needs to realize that he has taken an oath to the Constitution. He's not taking an oath to wins and losses, but he's taking an oath to the Constitution. And the defense attorney is taking an oath to represent that client zealously, and the judge is taking an oath to the Constitution as well. And I think when people don't fulfill those oaths and don't fulfill those honorable positions with honor, we have a big problem.
Thank you. Scott, same question.
Thank you. So, systemic racism exists in this country and in the courts, and it's something that everyone has a responsibility to address. Brian outlined sort of the process there. The prosecutor will make an offer and the defense will accept it, and then the judge will sign off on it. Well, the judges have a responsibility. They have to accept the offer, or they can choose not to. And if they're seeing the black man go to jail for marijuana and the white man pay a fine, and the judge is willing to accept that offer, that's on the judge, and that's not something that can be accepted. So it's the whole system has a responsibility, and if you see something, you have to act on it. And I'm not going to sit by and let two people with the same offenses and the same history, essentially the same case, receive different sentences. We need to have fairness across the board. So when we talk about an obstacle to justice, we have so many people in the system who sometimes their priority is, I want this case done, or I need to clean up a little bit, and they don't take the time to really make sure that what they're doing is appropriate. That's not something that I'm willing to do. If it takes an extra 10 minutes on a case to make sure that it's consistent with all the other cases, then so be it. So that's one obstacle. But another obstacle, we've talked about it earlier, is the resources of the defendants or the parties. If Brian is arrested tomorrow,
Thanks, Scott.
if Brian's arrested tomorrow and he can afford the best attorney in town, and I get arrested the next day and I can't afford, anyone, and I'm on a public defender wait list sitting in jail for 6 months trying to get an attorney, I think that's a huge obstacle. So the resources that would be available to the defendants and what we can do as a court to try to balance those scales is an obstacle.
All right, thank you, Scott. All right, gentlemen, we're at a spot where we're going to do closing statements. You'll each have a minute, and we'll start with Scott.
Sure. Again, I want to thank everyone that is tuning in and listening, and thank the city and JCTV and the News Tribune for helping us do this. I think it's very important for people to be educated, and I think that, this is a great opportunity to do so. We spent so much time tonight talking about one aspect of the courts and one aspect of the associate court. And I think it's important for the viewers to know that these criminal cases do not make up the entirety of what the associate circuit will do. And there is going to be more to the responsibility of the judge than how they're going to address bond and repeat offenders and diversion programs. There are cases that are just as important in a different realm. You might need an estate probated, or you might need a guardianship done, or you could be going through a divorce and need a judge that has some experience in that area, or you might have a child in the juvenile court system, and there's so much more that the associate court can do than the criminal cases, and I'd like the viewers to keep that in mind. We'll go out and vote in 4 weeks on November 3rd. I would appreciate everyone's support. I do appreciate their time. I think I'm out.
All right, thank you, Scott. Brian?
Thank you, Gary. In closing, look, I've been around for a while here in the municipal division as the prosecutor and the judge. I've got the experience to the first day to hit the ground running and to move forward in these things. I have experience in criminal law, I have experience in administrative law, and juvenile law, and civil law, on both sides, on all sides of the situation. And with that, it brings to the table the ability to see the situation and to see the facts from all sides. And I think it's very important that the people know that the judge up there is the judge is going to be fair and treat you right. It's going to be the judge that's been involved in the community, that's been out there with you elbow to elbow, putting sandbags out, coaching your kids, being involved in the nonprofits with you, and looking out for the best things in our community. And one of those best things is to make sure we have an equal and fair justice system. I imagine a lot of you have come in front of me over the years, and I believe that I've treated you fairly and I've treated you justly. And I ask you to remember me and remember to vote Stumpy for judge in November. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. On behalf of the News Tribune, I'd like to thank Scott and Brian for participating in this forum. I'd also like to thank the city again and JCTV staff for their assistance in holding and broadcasting the forum. In addition to a story about this forum in tomorrow's News Tribune, we plan to ask the candidates questions that we didn't get to tonight and then publish them in Sunday's News Tribune. As part of our continuing election coverage, we will be hosting a House District 60 forum at 6 p.m. Thursday night here. It will be live streamed on newstribune.com and will be aired on later dates at JCTV. You can still submit questions for those candidates by sending an email to vote@newstribune.com. I'd also add, if you have questions that you would like to ask Brian or Scott, you may send them to vote@newstribune.com. We will track them down and ask them those questions for you. Our society is best served by an informed and active electorate. I would encourage you who are listening to take advantage of these resources and then get out and vote November 3rd. Good night. Good.